welcome to the People by People podcast with me, your host, Laura Sutherland. Today, I'm joined by the fabulous Michelle Goodall, who is CMO at Guild. And I'm really pleased because we're going to be talking about community. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolute dream. And it's funny that we have known each other on Twitter for so many years, yet this is the first time we're actually doing anything collaborative or actually meeting each other, which is brilliant.
It's very odd. It's about 15 or so years we've known each other. So yeah, a long time.
And when I start traveling again, I will definitely make a point of coming to see you.
And the same for me. Next time I'm up in Glasgow, I'm definitely looking you up.
Oh, good. So yeah, we're going to be talking about community today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your job at Guild so that people kind of get a bit of an understanding?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm CMO at Guild, and CMO basically means doing everything in relation to marketing, growth, brand, but also communications as well. So we see marketing and communications as an integrated function. Guild is a professional communities and networking app. It was purpose built for businesses and professionals, and it's as easy to use as consumer messaging apps like WhatsApp. It's ad free, it's privacy and GDPR compliant, and if you want to set up branded communities, you can do it in minutes. You can create custom branding, there's admin features and analytics, so it's a fantastic place to set up professional communities.
Awesome. And I have tried, and I've been on a couple of different groups on Guild as well, and I must make more of an effort to be on it more and be more active. I think that's one of the things, like, you have that responsibility yourself, don't you, when you're a member of something, to actually be active and participate in it, because it doesn't just happen.
Yeah, I think so, but Guild is very different to social platforms in that it's not algorithmic, so you can dip in and you can dip out. And I think we recognise that, you know, when you're a business professional, what you want to do is to separate the personal from the professional. So, you know, we fully expect people to have, you know, days and weeks off. You know, it's the holiday season. You know, you really don't want to be kind of logging into something on a daily basis when you should be having, you know, downtime and relaxing as well. So, you know, make the effort, yes, but also if it fits in with your time and, you know, your energies as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely been groups I've had to leave on Facebook just for being inundated on my feed, and I'm like, no, this is private space. There's definitely a fine line. But I suppose, like, one of the things that we talked about at the start before we came on to record was that public relations has a really amazing opportunity to embrace community and to develop community, but there's a worry that we might miss the boat on this, like we did with SEO, like we did with influencer, etc. What are your thoughts on how PR people are currently working in the community space?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few people who are currently working in the community space, but I would say it's the sort of the age-old issue with comms and PR. They've not really articulated the value in a way that clients are able to buy those services. And you know, for anybody who has been connected to me on Twitter or has met me in real life, I am a bit of an agitator, and I probably have a bit of a reputation for sort of going, come on, guys, and, you know, rally rousing. And I'm sure that I get on people's nerves, but I've been proven right a few times. So I was head of digital at a big consumer PR agency. And, you know, at the turn of the century was saying, you know, we need to get really turned on to this SEO business. And in fact, you know, we wanted to buy an agency who was very nascent in this space. So search engine optimization, and then social media, and then influencer marketing. And I think a lot of people were turned off by that word marketing. I would say that comms people have always had the skills to adapt and to really, you know, lay claim in these spaces, but have been a little bit too slow to actually articulate and also monetize these areas. And there are plenty of other specialist consultancies and agencies who have muscled in on these and also will do on communities as well. Now, when we talk about communities, I'm talking about online communities rather than physical communities, but obviously there is a convergence here because the most successful online communities tend to meet up in the physical space as well. So there are people like yourself, Laura, and others who have already started to think about, okay, how can I articulate my community strategy, my community engagement strategy, and also my community management strategy. Some have even gone so far as to, start to talk about CBM, community-based marketing, but you would be in the minority rather than the majority. And actually, for me, I think communicators, professional communicators, uniquely have all of the skill sets to be able to do community incredibly well. You need to be able to, spot connections. You need to be able to police conversations. You need to learn when to step in and step out. You also need to know how to spot reputational risk. There are moderation kind of issues as well. And notwithstanding the need and the requirement to set a strategy before you actually build the communities themselves. So there are a few people doing this, but as I say, in the minority rather than the majority.
Yeah, and the opportunity that is there for us to embrace what is a natural skill set, but also something that we can add. It's like a service you can add another string to your bow essentially. But people have to, I would say, definitely start to think about it in a different way from just posting, for example. One example I mentioned earlier on, I see a lot of posts on social media asking for recommendations for VAs, virtual assistants, who can manage businesses, brands, social media channels. And I always go on and say, why are you asking a VA to manage a social media channel? What skills do they have that, that would allow them to be able to manage or put out a fire, as you say, when to step in, when to step out. And I think that we're still, and we had a Twitter conversation about it, and we're still in a stage where people just see social media as a broadcast channel, broadcast opportunity, rather than having meaningful conversations. And it's the same for community as well. It has to be meaningful conversations, and that relates back to your strategies you mentioned as well.
Yeah, there's so many things that we can pick out of what you just said, Laura. But the one thing that I would say is that, I would say this, of course, because we have a community platform, but actually I've been lecturing in community strategy for the last 15 plus years. And I've always said that social media is not the place, if you want to invest in community, to invest your time and energy and effort. Yes, if you're a big consumer brand and you want brand visibility and awareness and all of those things, but actually in the professional sphere, these platforms are good, but they're not fit for purpose for communities. Now, I can give you lots of reasons for that, but all you have to do is kind of have a look at what we say on the Guild blog and also on social media as well. But ultimately, social media platforms are built to be algorithmic. They're built to sell advertising, and as a result, they encourage low level engagement bait, and they encourage people to broadcast. And actually, community platforms are very, very different to social media in that they're not algorithmic. You can be more respectful of people's time and attention as well. You can have deeper discussions and debates. So there's more value in the conversations that happen in these places and spaces. And I'm sure, again, that there'll be people who disagree with me and say, I'm fine with my Facebook group and my LinkedIn, kind of community or group that, is sort of withering on the vine. But ultimately, those platforms, they just have to change a couple of features, and then all of that hard work and effort that you've put into recruiting for, building and sustaining a community is gone. Onto your point about virtual assistants, I've always been an advocate for social media people, managers or whatever in the organisation to be front and centre within the organisation. Or if you're a smaller business and you can't actually manage to recruit and resource it, then to work with, again, specialists or agencies who really deeply understand the power of brand, can spot opportunities, again, can look at risk and reputation, can generate value out of conversations. So, yeah, I'm not a big advocate for virtual assistants for social media or kind of community. I would 100% agree with you.
I think it's just because people think it's a time saver thing. It's just about posting. It's just about getting that content on there, and it's not. And again, that comes back to this sort of poor understanding of the purpose of social media, or the purpose of communicating, or the fact that people shouldn't just be doing it for the sake of it. There has to be the strategy behind it. But that's a completely separate conversation. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on at the moment. And my fear is that they'll put people in charge of communities, or people will put people like that in charge of communities who aren't skilled enough, who can't spot those opportunities, who can't identify when there's going to be challenges ahead. But as you rightly point out, we're in the perfect position to be able to be those people to build those relationships and to build the conversations. And how, because I think one of the difficulties is that when people like us have consultants or agencies have bought into it, and they've developed their thinking around how they're going to be offering this to clients, how easy is it then for us to be able to sell that on to a client to invest in, because it is an investment?
It's really important when you are speaking to clients that you interrogate the brief and you say, okay, so this is what you've said that you want. Let's be really clear what your organizational objectives are. So, are they growth? Are they retention? Are they improving the lifetime value of your customers? Are they improving your customer experience? All of these different things. Ultimately, you will get the opportunity to, build communities and generate value in communities if you can pull that back to return on investment for your clients, because ultimately everything needs to tie back to one of those core business objectives, whether it's growth, whether it's efficiency, whether it's innovation, whether it is brand. So it's very, very simple. Set your SMART objectives, and those SMART objectives come from organizational or business objectives, and then key performance indicators that show that you are achieving them.
And it all comes back down to strategy.
Everything comes back to strategy. But it's really interesting, in a guild community, the comms and PR community, there was somebody this week saying, how long do you spend on strategy? And actually some very senior kind of people coming in and saying, well, actually you should be spending 7 days, 2 weeks or whatever, and it's based on insights and data and all of those things. And actually this poor person at kind of account manager level saying often the strategy is defined and we are at the sort of the tactical end of things. And you're always going to struggle if you are at that tactical end of things. So it is always going back to clients and saying, how does this align to your organizational strategy? You know that, Laura, and I know that.
Just two examples that I've kind of worked on for organizations or for clients: volunteer engagement and employee engagement. And these, although they are separate, I suppose, in terms of strategies for each of the different stakeholder groups, it's very much part of this sort of stakeholder engagement piece. And it's really interesting that there are, like you would treat different stakeholder groups in different ways. So for example, the volunteers, volunteers, obviously, by the very nature of what they do, they're doing it voluntarily. So they will be limited on time. They will be, kind of probably dipping in and dipping out, as you referred to before. Whereas if it's an employee perspective, then they have a vested interest in, getting the most out of, or putting the most into something to get the best return for their job, and because they're being paid essentially. And I think these sort of two examples are brilliant for the likes of Guild, where you can build communities and you can give people the freedom as well to have conversations, to have threads and discussions and things like that. And I remember there was one example, and it was, goodness, it must have been maybe this was about 15 years ago. So this was before social media. In fact, it would have been before that. So say 20 years ago nearly. We, as a PR agency, ran a forum back when forums were about, for a road safety organisation. And On this forum, there were like people who were commenting on road issues, safety cameras, all that type of stuff. Yes, it was that glamorous. And I remember back in the days when we didn't really get taught how to manage communication or manage people on these platforms or like conversations and that type of stuff. And one of the girls who worked, she worked in my team, she deleted a thread from the forum, which because it was negative. So rather than like nowadays you can report things or you can, you know, the admin can have a word with somebody and then it can be removed. She deleted the whole thing from the entire system. The client, let's say, was politically orientated, and when I questioned where the evidence was about the thread, it was completely removed, completely it gone. But it just shows you that, you know, people can be there, they can be monitoring stuff, but if they don't have the skills and education around the type of people that are going to be using it, whether it's volunteers, employees, or protesters and activists, or whoever it might be, you know, these people need the proper skill set to be able to do that. What kind of training is available for this type of thing? You know, for the mindset, for looking out for things, like, you know, you talked before about the antennae, that comes people with this natural, I suppose, natural skill set. But is there training available for this type of thing?
So there is, and what's really interesting is that there's not a lot around the soft skills that you talk about. There's more, you know, kind of training around, you know, moderation, setting up a community, recruiting, you know, the 90-day launch plan, sustaining, harvesting, re-engineering, the sort of the technical almost aspects of community strategy, community management and community building, and very little around the softer skill sets, which, you know, are really important. There are a number of free resources out there. There's people like Richard Millington from Feverbee, who publishes some amazing stuff. There's, you know, plenty of kind of free downloadable advice. You know, we write white papers and bits and bobs and blog posts as well. But as far as I know, so I used to lecture for e-consultancy at the Manchester Metropolitan University, and e-consultancy used to do a community strategy, community management course that was a physical workshop that I used to run. That no longer exists. And I genuinely think that there is a kind of a space for this, because it isn't just about the platforms and the technology and the kind of the features, etc. As you say, there are soft skills, there are reputational crisis management kind of skills, but also there's data skills, there's behavioral science skills. There are times when, as a community manager, you need to kind of join the dots between ideas and concepts and debates. You also need to think about how you actually deliver against the KPIs in your community. And one of the things I would say that people do incorrectly around communities is they measure it on engagement only. Now, again, as a kind of a bit of an academic in this space, I don't know if you remember Yahoo's pyramid. It used to say, look, in terms of a community, and actually they used to talk about community, so this is pre-social media, 90% of people within a community space will just be lurking. You know, they'll be taking on board the conversations that are happening, reading it and doing something with that, but actually not participating. 9% will be synthesizing, adding to stuff, being additive. And then 1% will be, you know, starting conversations and commenting and being active and out there. And actually, communities really represent who we are within real life. And again, in my sort of academic stuff, I talk about things like motivations of community members. We talk about the maturity life cycle of community members and communities. Motivations can be intrinsic, extrinsic, or explicit. So actually, you're getting into kind of behavioral science when you think about communities. So there's a lot to learn, but also, here's the good news, guys, there's a lot that you know about without actually having to turn that into, you know, academic learning as well. What I love about community strategy and community management is that it gives power and also gives agency to people who maybe have disabilities. So I've worked with people like the Multiple Sclerosis Society, for example, and a lot of their volunteer community staff actually are living with multiple sclerosis, which is a debilitating condition, but they're amongst the best community managers that I have ever met. And wow, if you want to go and see some great communities, go and have a look at, some of these, charity-based and also healthcare-based communities as well. And equally, community really suits people who are introverted extroverts. So they wouldn't necessarily get up and kind of speak at events, but they are fabulous at being managers within a community, starting conversations, rallying the troops, getting things, moving, making connections, ensuring that community members who've been a bit quiet for a while are actually okay, all of those things. They tend to be brilliant empaths, but actually community gives them the opportunity to really come to life and bring their skills to life. So, you know what, every day that I'm at Guild, I see something that just makes my heart jump, because I can see somebody doing something that is good. And I see people who are in roles as community managers that they wouldn't have otherwise, that really plays to those skills. And quite simply, the community managers that I've met on my various courses and stuff are the loveliest people that you will ever get to meet. And they're not often the extroverts, within a company or within an agency as well.
I think you made a really good point, which possibly some won't identify as a point yet until I mention it, but it's really important. And this is from a very kind of an experience-based thing as well as it being fact. It's really important that people invest in a community manager, someone dedicated to being there to start the conversations, to put out the fires, knowing when to shut up, knowing when to talk. It's so, so, so important. You cannot set up this community just by doing the technical stuff and saying, there you are, hop to it, and leaving people to their own devices, because it does not work.
You and I know that if you build a community, you then have to think about recruitment. And actually, in order to recruit, you've got to bring people in, or maybe even beta test it, get some conversations going. So when people join a community, they go, this is the value that I'm going to get from being a part of this. And also they see the behaviors that are there already. I've made and created so many communities over my professional career, and actually in B2B communities and B2C communities, the same rules exist. You cannot run a community and then just expect it to run on its own, as you say. And community management can be a matter of a few minutes a day. And then for others, it is all encompassing, and it might take, almost 24 hours a day. But you set that out, you determine in your community strategy, who is this for? What are the operating hours? What do you have to be a member? What does success look like? Do we have to stimulate a conversation every day, or could it be every week or every month or every 2 weeks, etc.? But to do that without actually somebody who is responsible and accountable for the success of the community, where you've determined what those successful objectives are and the KPIs around it, I just can't see how you can do it without a community manager. And you can do it as a volunteer. And we've got some fabulous communities, membership associations, charities, etc., where volunteers do run the communities. But in professional communities, when you've got developer communities, customer communities, trustee communities, advisory boards, etc., you do tend to have somebody in role who is a specialist community manager, and quite rightly too.
All too often people might try to set out to do something and then not realize that it needs that sort of dedicated person, talent, time, etc., to stimulate conversations and that type of thing. But I think that's when, if things don't work, then people kind of say, well, nobody was having a conversation, or nobody was using it properly, and it's because there wasn't that sort of example there for people to follow, and also for somebody to actually take charge and take responsibility. And as you say, if they've got KPIs to meet, they're going to be doing their job, and they're whether they're paid for it or as a volunteer.
And the community manager often, particularly in large organizations, is part of the marketing and communications team. They often have a kind of a social media remit as well. But ultimately, you do have to think about recruitment. You do have to think about marketing and communications around your community. You have to get that, kind of core of community members in, so whether that is beta testing or VIP members or whatever else, to kind of set something up and then, you know, post one thing and go, yes, talk to each other now. It just doesn't happen. I mean, you don't get that happening within events and rooms, do you? You would often have, you know, kind of sidetracks and panel presentations and stimulus or debates or topics, or here's a hack, you know, go away and solve this problem. You know, it's exactly the same as you would kind of, you know, treat events and successful kind of B2B networking and physical events as well. So yeah, don't undercook community, because you're going to be destined to fail. And also give it time. You know, for me, community is a lot like brand. You know, you've got to build it over a period of time, and it's got to be that sort of long to mid-term play for marketers and also communicators as well. You can't expect to have success overnight. In some instances you can. So on Guild, we created a community as the pandemic hit for event organisers called CREO, Corona Response for Event Organisers. And actually, within 24 hours, we had 300 event organisers on the platform going, what do we do? What happens with insurance? What happens with speakers? What happens with, you know, crisis and issues management? And actually this peer support community was a success, but we had to kind of define very quickly, what is the purpose of the community? Who is this for? What do you have to be able to come into the community? And actually, we created things like resources from the groups. We tried to connect up people. We asked people to do reviews of, you know, virtual community platforms, not community platforms, sorry, events platforms and event tech and all of those things. And, you know, today I think it's 1,200 members, and it is incredibly valuable to the events industry, and in fact anybody who runs events. But that is an example of an overnight success that is actually really rare in communities.
I was actually involved in that group.
Lovely. Welcome
Yes.
to CREO.
Because at that point in time, I had to make a choice by the start of April whether PR Fest was going to be virtual or in person in the June. So I was party to the conversation, also giving advice, because I was literally going through every single motion at that point in time.
Yeah.
So it was really useful, but also just to be alongside other people that are going through the same thing was kind of a bit more, I suppose you didn't feel as sort of out on your own. You know, everyone was going through the same sort of rubbish at that point in time, which was just a bit horrendous. But yeah, I think people adapted really well, and the fact that it's still going is brilliant. I think that's when you can start to make really good connections with people. But I think what this conversation has done is highlight that there is an opportunity for public relations. There's an opportunity for public relations practitioners to specialize, and there's also an opportunity for, you know, better, I would say, training, better education around what it is, what it does, and to train people to be the best they can be for those roles. Yeah. And I don't currently think that our industry necessarily is talking the right way about community, and is giving the right training courses or development opportunities around that. And I think from, you know, if you're an internal an in-house PR or communication practitioner, then, you know, there will be things that I'm sure now people, if they're listening, will be thinking, oh, well, that's not something we currently do, but now I can see from an employee perspective how it could be good.
I think just picking up on your point of sort of learning via osmosis almost, I would really encourage, you know, kind of comms and public relations professionals to come and join some guild groups and community. So I run one called Comms and PR Pioneers. So, you know, I wouldn't hold myself up as, you know, kind of a ninja community kind of manager, because I don't really have enough time to be able to give it the justice that I would love to. But, you know, I step back and I allow people to, you know, start the conversations and threads, and that's as it should be within a professional community like this as well. So come and join Comms and PR Professionals.
Well, there you are. Straight from the horse's mouth, you have been invited. So head over to Guild and sign up and try. And I think that's the thing as well. Like, don't be scared to try things. Thanks for your time on all things, well, a very brief whistle stop tour on community-based marketing and Guild as well, to tell us what's been happening and what's coming up. It sounds like there's some interesting features going to be released soon. And yeah, it would be good to kind of keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, Laura. Watch this space, more to come from us. And, we want to help and support, the sector as much as we possibly can. So look out for the resources, join some communities, get a feel for it, and ask us questions as well. Really do want to help, because I think you can be positive about opportunities. And I've been negative maybe in the past about opportunities lost. But for me, it's a phenomenal space to be in as communicators, because it plays to your strengths. So go for it. Own community, guys.
Thanks, Michelle.
All right. Thanks, Laura. Bye-bye.
I love getting on specialists to talk about their areas of expertise, because it just shines a light quite specifically on what we need to be learning, thinking about upskilling and etc. And community development is absolutely key. So with that in mind, if you haven't already subscribed to the People by People podcast, please do, so that you get the next episode directly to your app. And also, it would be great if you could leave me some feedback and a review, just so that other people can read them and know what to expect, what you might enjoy about them. I believe some people think that they're light touch, which is good in a way, because it's good to be able to cover a range of subjects. And at the end of the day, it is all about people buying from other people. So thanks for tuning in, and I will speak to you again in the next episode.